All right, so before we get into this, I want to be sure to state that one, I would never gear shame anyone for the gear that they have. I think that people should go out and buy the gear that they can afford. I think that they should absolutely take into account their budget, and I think that they should be happy with the gear that they can afford and the gear that they buy. Secondly, I also think that third-party lenses affords us the choice to be able to make conscientious purchases based on our budget. So I actually think that having third-party choice is really important. I think it's what makes the Sony E-mount system really attractive. With all of that being said, I want to talk about the price of the 135 G Master Prime. And I want to base this conversation around, is the price of the 135 G Master worth it? So let's start with this photo. This photo was made with the 135 G Master. And if you were to buy the G Master right now from B&H, brand new, which you shouldn't, but if you did, it would cost you $2,100, right? That's a lot. That's a lot of money. This photo was made with the 135 Sigma. And if you were to buy this lens brand new from B&H, which you shouldn't, it would cost you $1,500, $1,400, $1,399 with tax, around $1,500. And just to include everything, I've never shot with the Samyang lens, but the Rokinon 135 for Sony E-mount costs about $1,000 brand new if you were to buy it brand new, which you shouldn't, but if you did, it would cost you about $1,000. So we're talking about a $700 to $1,000 price difference, between all of the 135 Sony E-mount counterparts. And so is that price difference worth it? Well, if we look at these two photos, there's nothing axiomatically better about the G Master photo than the Sigma photo. But I am someone who has said before that if we are just talking about the final product, this final product that the majority of us are looking at on, the screen size of our smart device. Some people use tablets, some people, see it on TV. But if we're just looking at that final product and we're judging the price of our gear by that image that we see, then almost no gear would be able to separate itself by the price of the gear. Now, I'm not someone who's gonna sit here and trash the Sigma lens or the Samyang lens, the Rokinon lens, because I've owned a Sigma lens and it was a good lens. I liked it, but in reality, despite what most of the reviewers have said, despite most of the things that they say when they have the lens and they just test it and they do like these versus battles, when you use it long term, you start to really just see how clunky the Sigma lens is. And one of the major things about the Sigma lens, or two major things about the Sigma lens, is that one, it was huge, it was heavy, it was really heavy, it was very front heavy. And for someone such as myself, who used the 135mm as a walk around street lens, right? I make a lot of street portraits, and this lens I'm carrying around for hours at a time. The weight of the lens really did take a toll. And then the other thing is that when you're walking around and you're taking these street photos, these street portrait photos, autofocus is something that becomes very, very important. So when I'm doing my regular portrait work, such as this photo of Allie, or such as this photo of my other friend, the autofocus becomes less important because I have more time to control the environment. I can ask a model to hold that pose. I can give them a countdown. I can really control how fast I need the lens to work. But when I'm out and I'm shooting street photos, I'm shooting these street portraits, and I need to get the camera up to my eye and get the photo in focus as quickly as needed, the Sigma really did start to underperform for what I needed the lens to do. And so those are just two reasons immediately that I can think of for me that makes the 135 worth the price. And so then you might say like, oh, well, the Sigma lens is old and it probably has, you know, different focusing motors and stuff like that, things that get really technical. And you would be right. That is probably one of the reasons that it performs slowly. And so then the natural recourse to think that like, hey, this Rokinon has a lot of the newer technology in it. I don't know what the focusing system technology is on the Rokinon. I do think that that they do have some type of linear motor that is driving the autofocus system, but I don't know. And so I would say you're right. It probably would make sense at this time to purchase the Rokinon over the Sigma 135. And so then this $1,000 price difference becomes even more of a question when you're thinking about making this choice. And if you're someone who's making this choice, it does become really important, especially if you're someone on a budget. And so what's the reason for the price difference? Well, if we go back to cars, right? If we go back to cars and we ask ourselves, what is the difference between my Hyundai Palisade SE, which cost me, you know, this price, and the Honda Palisade Limited, or I forget what the top of Calligraphy. If you guys have not seen the video of the Hyundai Hyundai Palisade Calligraphy, you need to see it. It's a beautiful vehicle, but I digress. So my Honda Palisade SE and the Hyundai Palisade Calligraphy, right? Same car, does exactly the same thing, but the price difference between the build of this SE and the build of this Calligraphy is the difference in the price. And there's a lot of things that one doesn't need in the car that you get in the Calligraphy. You know, really high priced leather and interior LED lights and heads up display on the windshield that tells you how fast you're going. When you turn on your turn signal, there's like a camera that shows you. There's a lot of things in the build of the Calligraphy that you don't get in an SE. And it comes back to the same thing with these two lenses between the Rokinon 135 and the Sony G Master 135. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and say that the Rokinon is built cheaply. It's not. I don't know. I haven't touched it. I don't know that. I have not held it in my hands. But what I do know is from everything that I've seen, it is not constructed as beautifully as we know the G Masters to be constructed. When you look around this lens, you have all of the bells and whistles. This is the Hyundai Calligraphy of 135 lenses. Not only do you have one focus hole button on the lens, you have two focus hole buttons on the lens. It's light compared to most 135s. You have an aperture ring, you have a focus ring. Look at all of that glass. 82 millimeter filter thread on the front of this lens. That's a lot of light, bro. It's a lot of glass. Then you have the switch to make it click and not click. You have a focus limiter switch right here on the lens. And then you have a autofocus, manual focus switch. So not just that, but just the premium feel of this lens. You know that feeling of when you go from your college car, the car that you could afford, to the car that you want, the car that's like the car that you've dreamed about. There's two separate feelings in those cars. It's the same thing when I went from like You guys have heard me talk about this if you've been watching this channel for a while. There's a difference between using the Tamron 28 to 75 and there's a different feeling when you use the G Master 24 to 70. In fact, let's go back to what Pat Tomaso said when he was talking about showing up for client work with a camera.
You know, every year we always joke that, yeah, the iPhone's gonna replace your camera. It's definitely gonna replace your camera this year. This is the year that it does. It's gonna replace your Sony, your Canon, your Nikon, whatever, your Fuji. And it doesn't for most people. We all talk like that when the phone comes out. We do side-by-side comparisons with like professional DSLRs and mirrorless cameras in the iPhone. And we all say, hey, you know, it honestly looks just as good. But that next job, when a client calls you to come shoot something for them, you're not showing up with your phone. You're still grabbing your mirrorless.
You'll hear this a lot from a lot of filmmakers. There is a difference in how someone will treat you if you show up with a cinema camera or if you show up with a mirrorless camera. And the difference between showing up or holding the difference between holding a Rokinon lens and holding a G Master becomes, that feeling is, I can't describe it, but you feel it immediately. Hey, so full disclosure, I just got a heat warning on my A7 IV, but it's because I had the screen closed. So what have we covered? We've covered that the Sigma was slow and clunky and super big and super heavy, and it was just old technology, and it was not designed for the Sony system in the first place. That lens is adapted for Sony's. The second reason is just build quality, right? Overall build quality. When you get up into or past the $1,000 mark for any lens, to me, I expect that you know, the build quality starts to become one of the things that I want to see improved, right? Like I want to see a better lens once you get past the $1,000 mark than I think I would expect for Tamron prices. And then the last thing, and I just kind of touched on it with the Sigma lens, is that this lens was built to perform with Sony cameras. And that may not be important to some people because they don't understand what that delivers. Let's go back to this photo of Allie. In this photo I made with my my A7R4, which has 61 megapixels. It's a 61 megapixel camera, and that just means amazing resolution, right? Amazing resolution. Now that kind of thing is important to someone like me, and it may be more important to someone like me who doesn't view all of my photo content on devices. And that's not to shame anybody, but one of the things that I like to do for myself is make a photo and print that photo off as big as I possibly can. And so resolution and stuff like that, pixel peeping, becomes less important to, you know, people who don't like to do that. And one of the reasons why this Sony G Master becomes really important to me is because it was designed specifically for the purpose of making this camera, this A7R4, perform to its highest capabilities. And so when you are someone like me who wants, as my boy Jared Poland would say,
the best of the best with honor, sir,
all of the things that this lens provides or allows me to accomplish with this camera becomes really important. It becomes less about the final photo, right? Because I think as you start to grow as a photographer, you learn that the photo is just a destination, right? And a lot of times in life, the destination is far less important than the journey that you take. And when you talk about the quality of life, when you are a photographer, the longer you are a photographer, the more the quality of life becomes for making photos. One of the things that I hear a lot from photographers is that their camera is uninspiring. And that's a huge statement, right? Because I have this camera here, and this camera, actually, Allie, who's in the picture, the redhead, gave me this camera because she wasn't using it. This is a Rebel XTI. This camera is, I don't know, some years old, 2006 or 2000, I don't know, it's an old camera. It's an old DSR by Canon. And this camera, with the right lens, not this lens, probably with the 50 millimeter 1.8 that, you know, everyone fell in love with, could probably make a photo that is just as nice looking, especially when you're viewing it on, you know, smart devices, as this photo of Allie. Someone could make close to the same photo with this camera. But it would take a lot of work to do it with this camera. Could I make that photo with this camera? Yes, I could, begrudgingly, because this is not a camera that, for me, where I am in my photography career, I would enjoy shooting with. By the way, I'm gonna give this camera away, but I wanna make a video on it first. So if you're interested in having this camera, let me know in the comments. It's not a camera that I would recommend, but it's a camera that I'm giving away. So if you want it, let me know. But I'm hoping that it's a beginner photographer. There's a whole thing. I'll make a video. Anyway, back to what I was saying. It becomes more about being inspired by your gear than it becomes, can I make this photo? And so that is one of the things that I'm afforded with the 135. When I'm out doing street photography now with this lens, I am not waiting for focus. When I start up my camera, it doesn't take as long for the camera to start up because this is a lens that was designed for that camera. It's not heavy anymore. It's not making my wrist hurt. When I pick it up, I am inspired by this lens. Holding this lens makes me want to go out and shoot with this lens. Is this lens worth $2,000? Yes, it is worth $2,000 to me. Is this lens worth $2,000 to a hobby photographer who just needs a 135 that wants to go out and shoot portraits? No, obviously, because this is more lens than you probably think you need. And so I hate to be one of those creators that says, well, it all depends on, you know, who you are and what you're shooting, but that is an honest answer. Something else that I want to say really quickly, and I kind of said this at the beginning of the video, I would never shame someone for the gear that they have. And gear shaming is a disgusting kind of thing to do, right? But when we talk about gear shaming, we always think of people punching down. We always think that it's the people who have the gear who say, that budget gear is crappy. But gear shaming goes both ways. And what I mean by that is I want and I respect a person who looks at something and says, that is out of my budget. I want to buy the thing that I can afford. I respect that person. But what I can't respect is a person who tries to intentionally down talk something because they can't afford it. And that's just as disgusting. Just because you can't afford something doesn't mean that it's not worth the value to someone who can afford it. And that absolutely is gear shaming, and we should stop it. So that's all I want to say about that. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.